Let me tell you something nobody admits. You can give your family a big house, a full fridge, and a perfect life, and still lose them, not in a divorce, not in a fight, but in silence. Because one day you look up and you realize the people you worked for learned how to live without you. I learned that too late. I'm 92 now. Some mornings I wake up and for a few seconds I forget. I forget that my body is old. I forget that my hands shake. I forget that the world moved on without me. And then I hear it, the sound of my own house. Quiet. Too quiet. A big house has a special kind of silence. It doesn't feel peaceful. It feels abandoned. People think loneliness is being alone. No. Loneliness is being surrounded by everything you ever wanted and realizing none of it wants you back. I used to believe money could solve anything. I believed it because I grew up with none. I grew up in a home where the walls were thin and winter came through them like a knife. I remember watching my mother count coins on the kitchen table. Her fingers moved fast, like she could trick poverty into leaving, but poverty never left. It just watched us. I was the boy with shoes too small, the boy who pretended he wasn't hungry, the boy who learned early that the world respects you only when you have something to show. And I was humiliated more times than I can count. At school, kids laughed at my clothes. Teachers looked at me like I was already defeated. Even grown men would talk over me like my voice didn't matter. And one day, I promised myself something, not quietly, not gently. I promised myself with rage. I said, I will never be poor again. I will never be powerless again. I will never let anyone look down on me again. That promise became my religion. And then I met her. She wasn't impressed by money because neither of us had any. She loved me when my hands were empty. She loved me when my future was uncertain. She loved the part of me that still believed in goodness. And when she got pregnant, I remember standing outside in the cold, staring at the sky and feeling fear so strong it made me sick, because suddenly it wasn't just my life anymore. It was theirs. And I made another promise. I promised I would give them everything I never had. A warm home, food, safety, respect. I didn't realize I was also promising something else, that I would disappear little by little to pay for it. My first job wasn't glamorous. Long hours, rough hands, cheap coffee, but it paid. And for a man like me, payment felt like proof that I was becoming someone. I worked harder than everyone else, not because I loved work, because I hated being small. I hated the memory of hunger. I hated the way people looked at me when I had nothing. I wanted to become untouchable, and the world rewards men like that. At first, my family was proud. They'd wait for me at the door, little arms around my legs, a warm meal, a kiss that made me feel human again. I told myself, this is why I work. This is why I suffer. But the promotions came, and the hours grew, and slowly I started coming home later, then sometimes not at all. I missed birthdays. I missed school plays. I missed bedtime stories. I missed the small moments that build a childhood. And I told myself, they'll understand. I'm doing this for them. That sentence, it can destroy a life because it sounds like love, but it's often ego. I didn't just want to provide. I wanted to win. I wanted to be admired. I wanted to be the man nobody could look down on. And the more I chased that feeling, the more I became a stranger in my own home. I remember one night, I walked in after midnight. The lights were off. The house smelled like cold dinner. And I saw her sitting at the table. She didn't yell. She didn't cry. That would have been no easier. She just looked at me like she was studying someone she didn't recognize. And she said, "You're building a life, and we're not in it." I laughed, not because it was funny, because I didn't know how to face the truth. I said, "Don't start." I said, "I'm tired." I said, "You like eating, don't you?" God, I still hate myself for that line, because that's the moment I confused providing with loving, and she didn't argue. She just stood up and went to bed, and I stayed at the table, alone with my pride, feeling like I had won something. I didn't realize I had just lost something, quietly, without a fight. Years passed, and the house got bigger, the car got nicer, the suits got cleaner, but the warmth disappeared. My children stopped running to the door. They stopped asking when I'd be home, because children learn. They learn what to expect. They learn who shows up and who doesn't. I didn't notice it at first. I was too busy chasing the next step. And then one day, my daughter graduated. I was supposed to be there, front row, camera in hand. Proud tears, but there was a meeting, a critical meeting, a meeting that would be forgotten by everyone except the people it stole from. I told myself I'd make it. I told myself I'd arrive halfway. I told myself I'd be there for the important part. But I arrived late. The parking lot was empty. The chairs were being folded, and I saw her standing by the stage, holding the diploma, looking at me with eyes that had already forgiven me, because she had already given up. She didn't scream. She didn't cry. She said softly, "It's okay." And somehow that hurt more than anger, because "it's okay" was not comfort. It was surrender. That night, my wife gave me an ultimatum. She said, "I don't want your money. I want you," she said. "Either come home or don't come back at all." Those words, they should have saved me. But instead, they offended me because I didn't see myself as absent. I saw myself as a hero, a man sacrificing, a man doing what other men wouldn't, and heroes hate being questioned. So I said something cruel. I said, "You wouldn't survive without me." And I watched her flinch, like I slapped her. I watched the love leave her eyes, not all at once, but enough that the future changed. She went to bed that night, and I didn't follow. I stayed up, staring at my hands, and for the first time I wondered, what if I'm wrong? But the next morning, I put on my suit and I went to work, because work never asked me to be soft. Work never asked me to be present. Work never asked me to admit I was failing, and that's why it's dangerous. It's the easiest place to hide. Then came the day the house felt different, not quiet, empty. I walked in, and the air didn't feel like home. It felt like a hotel. There were fewer pictures, fewer shoes by the door. The closet looked lighter, and then I saw it. A note. Simple, no anger, no insults, just truth. We needed you, and you weren't here. That was all. I stood there holding the paper, like it was heavier than my entire career. I wanted to call her, but my hands didn't move. I didn't know what to say. I didn't know how to apologize because I had spent years convincing myself I was right. And if I apologized, it would mean admitting I had wasted something priceless. So I did what proud men do. I waited. I told myself she'd come back. I told myself it was temporary. I told myself she was just emotional. I told myself she needed time, and time passed, and she didn't come back. The children visited less, then rarely, then only on holidays, then not even that. And still, I kept working, because if I stopped, I would have to face the empty rooms. And empty rooms, they don't lie. One night, I sat in my office, late, and I realized I didn't know my son's favorite song. I didn't know what my daughter was afraid of. I didn't know their dreams or their heartbreaks. I had raised strangers. And the worst part was that they had learned how to live without me. That's what absence does. It teaches people independence. It teaches them not to need you. And when you finally show up, they don't know what to do with you. Because you are late. You are late to the life you were supposed to live. When I retired, I expected peace. I expected family dinners, grandchildren on my lap, forgiveness. I thought, now that I'm free, I'll finally become a father. I'll finally become a husband. But retirement doesn't give you a family back. It just removes your excuses. I called my children. They answered politely, like I was an old co-worker. They said they were busy. They said maybe next week. And I recognized that phrase because it was mine. It was my voice, my words, coming back to punish me, maybe next week, maybe later, maybe soon. And then my wife got sick, not suddenly, slowly, like a candle shrinking. I visited. I tried. I brought flowers. I brought money. I brought everything except time. Time was the only currency she needed, and I had spent it already. One evening, I sat beside her bed. The room smelled like medicine and regret. She looked at me, and her eyes were tired. Not angry, just tired. She whispered, "I used to miss you. Now I'm just used to you being gone." That sentence killed something in me, because missing someone means love is still alive. Being used to their absence means it's already dead. I wanted to scream. I wanted to beg. I wanted to trade my entire career for one more ordinary day. One day of breakfast, one day of laughter, one day of being needed. But life doesn't do refunds. It only teaches, and it teaches brutally. After she passed, the house didn't just become quiet, it became hollow. I used to think silence was peaceful, but silence in a house that once had laughter is not peace. It's punishment. I remember the first morning after the funeral. I walked into the kitchen and for a second, for one stupid second, I expected to hear her moving around. The soft sound of a kettle, the clink of a spoon, the tiny noises that used to mean life was happening, but there was nothing, only the refrigerator hum, only my own breathing, only the sound of a man realizing he waited too long. People brought flowers, they brought food, they said kind words, they said, she knew you loved her, she was proud of you. But when the door closed and the visitors left, I was alone with the truth, and the truth doesn't care about comforting words. The truth only cares about what happened. I walked through the house like a stranger. Rooms I had paid for, rooms I had earned, rooms that looked impressive to other people, but none of those rooms felt like home. Because home is not walls, home is a voice, home is presence, home is being needed. I opened closets, drawers, boxes. I don't know why. Maybe I was searching for her. Maybe I was searching for a version of myself that didn't fail. In the back of a closet, behind winter coats, I found a small box, taped shut, dusty, like it hadn't been touched in years. My hands shook as I opened it. Inside were things she kept. Not valuable things, not expensive things, the kind of things that matter. Only when you're old, photographs, letters, a child's drawing, and a small voicemail recorder, a cheap little device, the kind you buy without thinking and forget you even own. There was one message saved, just one. I stared at it for a long time. My thumb hovered over the button, and I didn't press it, not at first, because I was afraid. I was afraid it would prove that I could have fixed everything. I was afraid it would show me the moment love was still alive, and I chose not to save it. But eventually, I pressed play, and her voice filled the room, young, soft, alive. She said, it's late. I know you're working. I just wanted to hear your voice. I miss you. And then a pause, a long pause, like she was swallowing pain, like she was trying not to cry. And she said, I don't need more money. I need my husband. And the message ended just like that. No dramatic goodbye, no screaming, no curse, just need. I sat down right there on the floor like my legs had forgotten how to hold me. And I listened to it again and again and again, because it was the closest thing I had to time travel, to hearing the past when it was still breathing. And I realized something. I had spent my whole life trying to become important, and in the process, I had become unnecessary. That's the tragedy. You can become successful and still fail. You can become rich and still be poor, because there's a kind of poverty money can't touch. The poverty of an empty home, the poverty of children who don't call, the poverty of being remembered as the man who was never there. That night, I slept in the living room, not in the bedroom. The bedroom felt like a museum, like a place where love used to live and died. I stared at the ceiling, and I thought about every time she waited up for me, every time she pretended she wasn't angry, every time she ate dinner alone, every time the children asked, "Where is he?" And she had to lie to protect my image because she didn't want them to hate me. She wanted them to love me, even when I wasn't there. And I repaid that kindness by being absent. I wanted to call my children right then. At 3 a.m, I wanted to say, "I'm sorry, I'm sorry, I'm sorry." But apologies don't rebuild years. They only acknowledge ruins. So I waited until morning, and when the sun came up, I did something I had avoided my whole life. I called, not for business, not for work. I called for love. The phone rang once, twice, 3 times, and then a voice answered. Not warm, not cold, just careful, like someone answering a call from the past. I said my child's name, and my own voice cracked. I hated that. I hated sounding weak, but I was weak. I said, "It's me." A pause, and then, "Yes? Not Dad, not Father, just yes." That one word told me everything. It told me I had become a stranger. I said I listened to an old message. I didn't know it was there. I didn't know she kept it. Another pause, and then she kept a lot of things. The voice wasn't angry. That would have been easier. Anger means there's still heat, still care. This was different. This was distance. I said, "I'm sorry. I'm sorry for everything. I'm sorry I wasn't there." And I waited, like a man waiting for a verdict. Then the answer came, quiet, honest, brutal. "You were there, just not with us." That sentence was a knife. Because it was true, I had been alive. I had been walking, talking, working, laughing with strangers while my family grew up. Now, without me, I asked, "Can I see you? Can we have dinner?" And the voices said, "We can try." Try. That word, it sounded polite, but it also sounded like I was not a priority. And why should I be? I had trained them for decades to live without me. You can't disappear for 20 years and then demand closeness. Love doesn't work like that. I drove to the restaurant early. I sat in the parking lot watching families walk in together, kids running ahead, parents carrying bags, ordinary scenes I had missed 1,000 times. When they arrived, I stood up too fast, like my body wanted to apologize. I saw older faces with my eyes, my jaw, my blood, but not my warmth. We sat, we talked about weather, about traffic, about nothing, because none of us knew how to talk about the real thing. Then I asked quietly, "Did she suffer?" And my child looked down and said, "She didn't complain. She just stopped expecting." That's when I realized my wife didn't die the day she got sick. She died slowly, the day she stopped believing I would ever come home. I wanted to say, I loved her. I wanted to say, "I worked for you." I wanted to defend myself, but defending yourself is what you do when you care more about being right than being close. So I stayed quiet and I listened. I listened to the stories I wasn't in, the stories of school, of heartbreak, of laughter, of small victories. And I smiled like a guest in my own family's life. When dinner ended, I paid the bill out of a habit. And then I stopped myself because money was my old language, and I was trying to learn a new one. So I didn't offer my wallet. I offered my hands. I said, "Can I hug you?" A pause, and then a hug, awkward, brief, but real. And for the first time in years, I felt something I hadn't earned. Grace, and when I got home, I sat in the dark and I thought about the strange cruelty of time. When you're young, you trade love for ambition because you believe ambition will last. But ambition fades, titles disappear, companies forget you, money gets spent, and all that remains is who you were to the people who loved you. That's your real legacy, not what you built, but what you protected. If you're listening and you're still in the years where choices matter, listen carefully. Your family doesn't need your money as much as they need your presence. Your children won't remember your overtime. They'll remember empty seats. Your partner won't remember the size of the house. They'll remember eating alone. And one day you will finally have time. You will finally be free. And you will finally want to come home. But home is not a place. It's a relationship. And relationship can't be repaired with later. So go home. Not tomorrow. Not next week. Tonight. Call them. Sit with them. Ask them questions. Listen without checking your phone. Be there while love is still alive. Because success doesn't hug you back. And at the end, when the lights go out, the only thing that keeps you warm is not what you earned, it's who stayed. Comment below. What are you choosing right now that you might regret later? And if you want more stories like this, subscribe. This is Borrowed Time Stories, wisdom from the edge of time.